It was supposed to be a flawless victory. Moscow believed the skies were theirs, protected, predictable, and untouchable. But in war, confidence can be fatal, because on that cold November night, a single decision from the Kremlin didn't just cross a line, it triggered a response that would rewrite the rules of modern warfare forever. What Russia didn't know was that while their bombers celebrated success, Ukrainian commanders were already watching, waiting, calculating, not for hours, not for minutes, but for one precise second, the perfect moment to strike. And when that second arrived, it destroyed decades of Russian air power in less time than it takes to blink. Just before midnight, Russian bombers roared over the border, delivering a brutal strike that wiped out Ukrainian supplies and radar systems. The damage? Nearly $2 billion gone in a firestorm of explosions. Russian pilots cheered over the radio, mission complete, a patriotic victory to brag about on state TV. But this wasn't just a strike, it was a trigger, because 1 week earlier, President Zelensky made a promise, one Russia brushed aside like empty rhetoric. For every strategic asset Ukraine loses, Russia will lose too. That wasn't a threat, it was a countdown. And as the bombers turned homeward, low on fuel and trusting their airborne gas stations to guide them safely back, that countdown hit zero. Russia thought the night was over, but for Ukraine, this was only the beginning. Because what came next was an operation so precise, so devastating, and so unexpected that it shattered Russia's long-range air power in under a single minute. High above Belarus, two Il-78 aerial refueling tankers moved into position. Massive aircraft that keep Russia's long-range bombers alive in the air. Each one carries enough fuel to extend a strike by thousands of kilometers. Without them, those bombers are just expensive planes with short legs. Russia saw these tankers as safe. They were operating inside friendly airspace, shielded by some of the most advanced air defense systems Moscow owns, including S-400 batteries designed to stop anything that flies. That confidence was the first major miscalculation, because while Russia trusted those defenses to watch the skies, Ukraine had already slipped under them. The real target of the night wasn't the warehouses destroyed in Chernihiv. It was these two flying lifelines, assets that Russia simply could not replace quickly. And Ukraine knew exactly where they would be, when they would descend to refuel, and how to hit them without warning. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was the finishing move of an operation prepared days in advance, an operation designed to knock out the backbone of Russia's long-range aviation in one precise strike. Russia believed their mission had ended successfully. In reality, the most important battle of the night was just about to start. Thousands of meters above Belarus, the battlefield was almost invisible. A digital trap spread across the night sky. For more than 48 hours, Ukraine had been quietly tracking the tankers and their bomber escorts, waiting for their predictable descent to refueling altitude, 15,000 feet, the moment when these massive aircraft would be most exposed. Ukraine didn't rush. It watched. It recorded every movement. And when the Russian aircraft dropped lower, the trap was sprung. The first move wasn't an attack. It was deception. Suddenly, multiple small targets appeared on radar, fast, and heading directly toward Belarusian airspace. Russian defenses reacted as expected, with overwhelming force. S-400 launchers fired a volley of high-cost interceptors. A nearby Pantsir system emptied its cannons in a matter of seconds, filling the air with defensive fire. But all they were shooting at were decoys, inexpensive drones designed to do one thing: force Russia to waste missiles and leave the sky unprotected. It worked perfectly. The S-400 battery responsible for guarding the tankers had spent its ready-to-fire missiles on targets worth a tiny fraction of the cost, and while the crews rushed to reload, the airspace became vulnerable. Russian pilots, still confident in their defenses, had no idea that the most dangerous threat of the night hadn't even started moving yet, because hidden below the radar line, flying low, silent, and waiting for the exact second to strike were the drones that actually mattered. Ukraine had cleared the sky. Now it was time to remove the aircraft that kept Russia's long-range power alive. With Russian defenses distracted, the real strike force emerged. 4 Ukrainian drones rising from the darkness just 150 feet above the treetops. Each pilot had only one assigned target. One chance. No room for error. The Russian aircraft were in refueling formation. A tanker ahead, bombers closing in behind, waiting for fuel that would take them safely home. It was the ideal setup. Close, predictable, vulnerable. The attack attack began with a single laser pinpointed at the lead tanker's engine. A missile dropped away, fast, silent, and guided with precision. It hit exactly where it needed to, the turbine that kept this massive aircraft airborne. Instantly, the tanker staggered, losing power and altitude. Within seconds, a second drone struck the refueling connection itself, severing the hose that linked bomber to tanker. Fuel began erupting from the line at hundreds of gallons a minute, forming a drifting cloud of vapor around the wounded aircraft. The third missile ignited that fuel.
A single spark transformed into a catastrophic explosion, far larger than the warhead itself, because at that altitude, the air becomes the weapon. The blast tore the lead tanker apart mid-air, snapping its structure and dragging one of the Russian bombers down with it. What was once a coordinated formation became a falling inferno, visible for miles. But the operation wasn't finished. A second tanker, the one Russia hoped could still save the mission, was already in the path of the fireball. A fourth Ukrainian drone delivered the final strike, one missile into the wing tank. The result was a chain reaction that left both tankers destroyed, two strategic bombers lost, and Russia's long-range capability suddenly cut in half. The entire execution lasted under 1 minute. For Russia, there was no time to respond. For Ukraine, there was no need to fire a second volley. The job was done. As flames lit up the sky over Belarus, Russia's escort fighters finally understood what had happened and what had been lost. Their mission was no longer support, it was retaliation. Missiles launched into the night, but visibility was wrecked by debris, smoke, and electronic interference. Locking on to a valid target became nearly impossible. Still, one Russian pilot refused to accept failure. He switched from missiles to cannon fire, dove hard toward the tree line, and relied entirely on thermal imaging. Amid the cold force below, he spotted a single fading signature, one Ukrainian drone breaking away a fraction of a second too late. He closed the distance and fired. The drone disintegrated, a minimal but undeniable price for the operation's success. The remaining drones had already vanished into the darkness, low enough to blend with the ground, invisible to radar once again. For Russia, the chase was over. For Ukraine, the mission was complete. 4 drones launched, 3 returned, one strike that reshaped the strategic balance. The airspace grew quiet, but the consequences of that silence were only beginning to take shape. When the fires finally burned out on Belarusian soil, Russia didn't just lose aircraft, it lost something far more valuable: reach. The IL-78 tankers that were destroyed weren't just fuel carriers, they were the key to Russia's long-range strike capability, the aircraft that allow bombers to hit targets deep inside Ukraine and still return home. With 2 gone in a single night, Russia's entire bomber fleet was forced into an immediate retreat. The remaining refueling aircraft, fewer than 8 fully operational tankers left worldwide, were ordered to flee thousands of kilometers east, far beyond the range of Ukrainian strikes. It was a defensive move that signaled fear. Without those tankers in forward positions, Russia's ability to launch long-range missile attacks dropped sharply, almost overnight. Targets that had been vulnerable suddenly became out of reach. This wasn't just a tactical win, it was a strategic blackout, the kind of damage that changes war planning for months. But the airstrike was only the first phase. As Russia scrambled to relocate its surviving tankers, Ukraine executed a series of coordinated attacks across the country. Oil refineries hit to choke Russia's fuel production, electronics factories targeted to disrupt drone guidance systems, rail substations disabled to halt military transport. These weren't symbolic strikes. They were aimed directly at the infrastructure that keeps Russia's war machine running. For Russia's leadership, the message was unmistakable. If you escalate, we will escalate smarter. And for the rest of the world, one thing became clear. The battlefield had entered a new technological era, where the side with better strategy and cheaper tools could defeat the side with the flashiest weapons. News of the destroyed tankers spread quickly, not through propaganda channels, but through internal military reports that reached political leaders before dawn. The shock wasn't just that Ukraine had struck deep into a supposedly safe airspace, it was how Ukraine had done it, with precision, coordination, and a budget thousands of times smaller than the assets it destroyed. For Russia, the response was immediate and telling. Within days, the Kremlin approved something it had resisted for years: the deployment of North Korean troops to reinforce frontline manpower and rebuild damaged infrastructure. It was a move that signaled desperation more clearly than any speech. Russia needed foreign soldiers just to maintain its position. The consequences didn't stop in Europe. The involvement of North Korean forces raised alarms in South Korea and Japan, sparking emergency defense consultations. A regional flashpoint, thousands of miles from the battle, suddenly became more unstable. Meanwhile, NATO nations recognized what Ukraine had just proven: a targeted, low-cost strike can disable a major power. The United States and Poland reacted with a major reinforcement package, including modern long-range missiles and hundreds of precision drones designed to repeat Ukraine's success on a wider scale. European leaders went further. Key officials made the case that Russia could no longer be treated as a temporary threat, but a long-term adversary requiring permanent isolation. Economically, militarily, politically, a new strategic divide was forming, and both sides knew it. Ukraine had shown that innovation could overcome numerical
historical advantage. Russia had shown that force without adaptation leads only to greater loss. The world was entering a new phase of conflict, one where the balance of power could shift in seconds.